And in order to better understand the depth and reach of this international epidemic, we went to where the problem lives, right on the streets.
7 Action News reporter Andrea Isom spent the night with an outreach group committed to abolishing human sex trafficking, one person at a time.
I don't want to be out here no more.
Okay, honey, what can we do?
He beat me so bad, man. I still got a lump on my cheek. I thought I was going to somewhere that was going to be a good situation for me, and it wasn't. I'm afraid for like all of you guys. It scares me. I want you to be okay.
A lot of them probably will die on the streets, and we might be the only good relationship that they will have ever seen. I want to be able to provide love for them that they may never get. Whatever you think about their life, dismiss all of those thoughts.
4 years ago, Debbie Ellinger started a mission. It was more like a calling. Ellie's House Outreach. It's a nonprofit organization that offers temporary shelter and a support system for people stuck in the throes of forced prostitution, and they meet them wherever they are. So on this night, we went out with Debbie, Katie, Nancy, Katrina, and Todd to see what they see.
How bad is it? I mean, like really, like tell me the real deal,
Yeah.
raw, I don't care if it scares me or makes me cry, how bad?
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, every family is really just a dysfunction away from their kid running away.
From getting caught up and trapped into human trafficking.
Within 48 hours, a girl will get approached and be asked to work, whether it be in the sex industry, strip clubs, as a prostitute. Addiction's probably the #1 way.
This her being a transgender.
No girl wakes up and says she wants to be a prostitute. They have no family, they have nowhere to go, they've burned bridges. A lot of women we talk to are just trying to get money to have a place to stay, food to eat. People are trying to survive.
So, twice a week, they get into this van. It is packed with clothes, food, hygiene products, blankets, you name it. And for hours, they drive up and down the streets on the east side of Detroit. They are forming bonds of trust and fellowshipping and praying with vulnerable and lost souls.
It's in your son's name we ask this. Amen. Amen.
They just want to do whatever they can to help the women that most people just judge and ignore.
This is our area right here.
Okay, here?
Yep.
The Harper and Chalmers neighborhood. And they knew more young women and victims than we thought they would. And what we saw was so sad.
It's the first time, they've had a healthy hug in a normal way, or it's the first time that, someone's held their hand and they're not trying to get something from them.
Once you start recognizing the faces and the names, it's not random and it's not strangers. It's like, oh, these are people that we know.
Our first stop will be in the Cabana Hotel on Harper. Would you be willing to talk to them?
Sure. I've been through a lot. I've seen my friend get murdered.
I love everybody out here that I really would do anything for them. I would.
What do you want to say to Debbie?
That I love her, and she's the best supporter. She one of the best supporters.
You're sweet, sweet girl, you know that?
And then we kept driving and finding more stories.
Hey, you need something to eat?
Cassie! How are you? How about this? This is nice and warm. Let me get you some gloves. Here, let me put your stuff in here for you. My name's Debbie. What's yours?
Tammy.
Hi, Tammy. Hi, DeBlanche. Hi, how are you?
Where are you going to sleep?
I don't know yet.
Are you scared, sweetie? A little?
To me, it's like I feel like I done lost everything, so I don't care anymore.
There's hope. I don't want you to feel like this. I don't know. I did not think it was going to be like this. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting it to be. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. It's a lot.
When we drive home, it's completely silent because we're all processing it.
Like, how do you not do something?
If you have the knowledge and you do nothing, then you're a part of the problem. So for me, there's no other option.
They have feelings. They're not just a commodity out here on the street. See them in a different light.
And then, it was not captured on camera, but something Deb prays for every day happened. A young lady walked up to the van and said, "Please take me to a safe place. I'm ready." So, we did.
Thank you for allowing us to tell the real story.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrea. Thank you.
Whew, I don't know. Where do I start? This story is hard to watch.
it's hard to relive, but we have to. We have to watch it, we have to share it, we have to spread the word, and we have to raise awareness. That night changed me in a lot of ways, and I'm committed to getting involved. And there's so many ways you can do that. I'll put all that information on our website, social media, everywhere. And I hope that Debbie and her team, you guys are incredible. I hope you're watching now. You are angels on earth. And I just want to say again, thank you. Reporting live, I'm Andrea Isom, 7 Action News.
Certainly tough work to go out there in the middle of the night and to help young
Yeah.
girls caught up.
Andrea, thank you for bringing that to us. And tonight's another night. And sadly, it's happening again tonight.
But at least a
Everywhere.
few more are off the streets
Right.
thanks to that group, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you.
Absolutely.
For more information.
Wow, that was a very sobering way to start our Saturday. But good morning, everyone. I'm Chevelle Roman, and on behalf of all of the members of the Great Lakes, Michigan chapter of the Links Incorporated, I'd like to welcome each of you to join in this very critical conversation concerning the truth about human trafficking. First, I'd like to share just a little bit about our organization. The Links Incorporated is an international nonprofit volunteer service organization that was founded on just 2 basic tenets: friendship and service. And under the umbrella of service, we sponsor a myriad of programs, such as this one that you're going to be participating in today, to bring awareness and outreach to the communities that we live in. And I am just very proud to say that since 2018, our chapter has continued to focus on initiatives eradicating human trafficking throughout the Metro Detroit area. But even though the data suggests that we have broadened our outreach and we have increased our awareness, unfortunately, human trafficking incidents have also increased. So for as long as this epidemic remains, our chapter will remain committed to conversations and programs such as this. There's a housekeeping item I'd like to address before we get started, and that is, if anyone in attendance today requires a certificate of participation to satisfy a community service requirement, please just indicate so via the chat, and we'll email a certificate for 1.5 hours, the time that you spend with us today, and we'll send that certificate to the email address that you use to register for this webinar. Okay, at this time, I think we're going to conduct a preliminary poll to assess the audience's basic knowledge of human trafficking. So if you see the poll on your screen, we're going to give everyone about 2 minutes. I like that little note, panelists can't vote. All right. I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds. Okay, we can take a little bit longer. All right, I think we're about 65%. of those who are in attendance have completed the poll. So we're going to give you about a minute more. We really want to see and have a baseline for what people think human trafficking is all about. All right, we're at 75% complete. We're going to give it about 15 more seconds and then we're done. We'll close out the poll. And we thank each of you for participating in this poll. All right. Now, I'd like to introduce the moderator for this morning's conversation, Ms. Andrea Isom. Andrea is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, currently serving as the special projects reporter at WXYZ TV, Channel 7. She's worked as an anchor and a reporter in many cities throughout her career, including Dayton, Ohio, Elmira, New York, Kansas City, Missouri, and right here in Detroit. And prior to joining WXYZ, she worked as a host, a correspondent, and a producer for the nationally syndicated program Crime Watch Daily. But when the opportunity emerged for Andrea to replant her roots back here in Detroit at WXYZ, she immediately took action and became a part of the investigative unit. She's excited about the opportunity to tell her stories about the great people of Metro Detroit. She's a proud member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she graduated from the Ohio State University. She's passionate about fighting for justice and social issues and equity for all. And I think you can see from that video clip, she is very, very passionate about the work that she does. She pours herself into her work, and we look forward, Andrea, to having you moderate this conversation this morning. Please welcome Andrea Isom.
Hello, everyone. Thank you first and foremost for having me be here with you this morning on such a tough topic, important topic, a topic that is vital for each and every one of us to get involved in. And I think I should have watched that story probably a few times today myself. I've watched it over and over again, but I think I should have, because I got really emotional seeing it again, because it kind of took me right back to that day and those moments after. As I said in the story, it changed me. It changed my way of telling a story about human trafficking and labor trafficking. It changed my relationship and perception of the people, the victims, how we as reporters cover this story and this truth and this journey that so many people are unwillingly on. It reminded me of my responsibility solely, and the responsibility of the rest of us, all of us, and those in my industry, that when you see or report on a story of a missing man, woman, or children, or a runaway teen, that we look at things differently. And we owe that to each and every person to do that. This is paramount. And I think you understand that. But when you hear the numbers and when you see them in your face and when you absorb the complexity and the evil around this crime, it should change you. And I hope it changes you to take action every day in some way. And if for those of you who don't know me and who have never watched me, I am not a talking head on TV. I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you. I want us to have an open, honest, and kind and compassionate and real dialogue about this, because that's where it starts. It's not going to stop if we don't talk about it and share what we learned today with everyone in our circle and outside of our circles. So that's something that we need to be committed to doing. I know I am. And I hope that if you are not, that you will leave this Zoom forum empowered to do so. You know, this is the story that you saw was about outreach and being involved. And this group twice a week is involved. These young women and men even are their family. These are the only people that they have in their corner right now. This is a complex problem, a complex epidemic, and getting people out of it and eradicating it is going to be a heavy lift. But I am committed to being a part of that. And the panelists that you will experience, they are too. But we all need your help. And again, this is about education, because that's where it starts, and communication, but this is also about continuing to be involved. So what we're doing here is also coupled with a donation drive, which is about outreach and supporting and helping and doing what we can right now, tangible things that we can do to make a difference for the victims out there, because we want to turn them into survivors and thrivers. And you're going to meet an incredible person who is an example of that shortly. So you're going to learn more about the donation drive in just a bit, but I want you to know that this is also about getting involved and donating your time, your resources, how much you have, how little you have, because whatever you have, it's going to make a difference. I promise you that. But let's talk about the tough stuff. You know, we have to. So by definition, what is human trafficking? I think we all have an idea, but by definition, this is what it says. The Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act defines human trafficking as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services, so for work, through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude. Involuntary, something that someone does not want to do. Involuntary servitude, debt bondage, or slavery of all kinds. That's by definition. But we all know there's so much more to that. And our panelists will share with you their expertise and why it goes so much deeper than just a definition. And the facts are startling. They will scare you. They will make you think. And not to say that I wanted to scare you, but I wanted to scare you to take some action. And I want the facts to sink in about how big of a problem this is, globally, nationally, and right here in our own backyard. So when we talk about the facts, the most common method of recruiting someone for human trafficking are through relationships, people that they know, romantic relationships, friendships, someone that you have a bond with, even family members, people that say they love you. That's the most common method of recruiting someone into human trafficking, believe it or not. And for teenagers, and I said this before about when we think about a runaway, for whatever reason, they got mad at mom or dad, or something didn't go right at home, or whatever, emotions are circulating in a young person at that age, being a teenager. We got to rethink that when we think about a runaway. We owe it to them, because the facts are the facts. Teenagers, of the ones who run away, approximately 30% of them will be approached by a pimp within 2 days of leaving their home. So when their loved ones call the news or reach out on social media and say they're concerned, they have every right to be concerned, because within 2 days, someone can get a hold of them. And if they are seen again, it may take a long road for that person to ever be who they were again, if they're seen again. Now, sexual exploitation and forced labor, forced work are the most common identified forms of human trafficking, but there are others: domestic servitude, forced marriage, organ removal. And I know that those are things that you think you see in a movie, but these are real things. This is happening in real life. Forced marriage, organ removal, and exploitation of children in the form of begging, sex trade, warfare. And when we talk about human trafficking, there are so many things that all of it is despicable, disgusting, and criminal in one of the worst ways possible. But there's money around it, and a lot of it. Every year, approximately $150 billion a year is made around the world because of human trafficking. And we're talking about people. And $99 billion of that comes from sexual exploitation. I know this is a lot to grab onto, isn't it? And around the world, globally, women and children make up 70% of human trafficking victims, and the majority are forced into sexual trafficking. And men, and I know a lot of times we focus on children and women, but men are victims too. And sometimes it looks different. But when we talk about men globally, 66% of men are living in human trafficking as forced workers, forced to do something that they did not on their own free will decide to do. 66% of men around the world. And get this one, in just 6 years, a 6-year span from 2004 to 2010, the percentage of worldwide human trafficking involving young children increased. It doubled, more than doubled in just 6 years. And then the rate of young boys in that 6-year span went from 3%, we're talking little boys, 3% to 12% in just 6 years. That should alarm you. That should alarm you. It alarms me. Globally, again, in Africa and in the Middle East, 62% of all human trafficking is children, are little ones. In Europe and in Central Asia, 66% of human trafficking is sexual exploitation. And now, we get back to home, where we all live, United States of America. If you did not know, there's a hotline, a national hotline for human trafficking. That's for people who are victims, who know someone's a victim, who suspect something is going on in their neighborhood or surroundings, or who knows something is going on. In 2019 alone, more than 48,000 people reached out to that number. And that's just who reached out. And when we think about human trafficking, I know, so many things are swirling around in our head, and we're like, what does it look like? Who are these people? How do they get involved in this? Who's more likely? Well, guess what? Just like any one of us could get the flu, or like we're all dealing with right now, COVID-19, any one of us could be involved in any sort of catastrophic thing at any place in time or moment in time. Same thing here. Human trafficking can affect any one of us. Yes, it's more likely that people that have other hardships in their life may fall prey to it more often, but that does not mean that each and every one of us could not become a victim. But yes, poverty and addiction within a home or your surroundings can play a part in it, sometimes more often. And when we talk about labor trafficking, and workers who are trafficked to do work that they did not sign up to do legitimately, those things are reported at a lower rate than sex trafficking, but they're happening. They're happening everywhere. And labor trafficking is most frequently reported as domestic work, agriculture, people who work in animal farming and traveling sales crews. And when you talk about sex trafficking, that's usually reported as an escort service, you know, or illicit massage, health and beauty and pornography. That's how sex trafficking is most frequently reported. And when we talk about how are people recruited, you know, who or what kind of individual approaches someone to bring them into the fold of something so monstrous? Well, it's not always a monster. It's not always the person that you think looks like someone menacing, because sometimes it can be someone that you have an intimate relationship with, a marriage, a spouse, a partner, a family member, a parent, an uncle, an aunt, a relative of some sort. Or it can be, you know, a solicitation, a job offer, an advertisement where you think, wow, this looks like an amazing opportunity to do something incredible, but the opposite happens. Not incredible, criminal. Someone posing as a benefactor and someone selling you false promises through fraud. And then you end up in this spiral that for some people it's impossible to get out of, but we're working on changing that. And then when we talk about children right here in the United States, when we talk about the innocent little ones, Black children comprise of 53% of all juvenile prostitution arrests and 40% of sex trafficking victims. Now, you know, as I did the story that you guys all saw, you know, yes, I came in armed with some information, of course, but then I learned so many other things throughout that journey of telling that story and then beyond, getting involved with Ellie's House and other organizations about human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. And when we talk about Michigan, but let's just focus, you know, yes, we live in the state of Michigan, but when we think about Metro Detroit, listen to this. Michigan ranks in the top 10. And a lot of times top 10, you want to be in the top 10, but you do not want to be in this top 10. Michigan ranks in the top 10 of US states for human trafficking, where we live. Michigan, top 10. And that's estimated, 1,100 to 4,000 people are enslaved in human trafficking in this state. And that's just estimated because we have to look at reporting. Not everyone's reporting what's happening to them or what they see happening to someone else. During 2019, 362 cases of human trafficking were reported, and again, just reported in Michigan. So think about all the ones that weren't. And I know when you think about all this, you rack your brain like, how are they doing this? How are these people doing this? How is this happening such a large number? How are the rates so astronomical? What is going on here? How are they getting these people? How? Well, there's a lot of ways, and they're happening right under our noses. They're happening in big places, big gatherings like the auto show, a prime place for predators to attack. That's one of those kind of places where it happens. You've got people coming in and out from everywhere. Major sporting events, and we have a lot of them here in our town. Super Bowl. Places like this are prime targets for human trafficking. So that's a lot. And I'm gonna let that sink in for a little bit because I know it's a lot to absorb, as it should be. And I want it to be, because if it's on your heart, as it should be, you're gonna pass it along to other people and you're gonna make it a mission to do something about it. And then we've got some incredible people that I wanna introduce you to right now. They're gonna help us in that mission. Our panelists, who are all distinguished in their own right. And I'm so honored to be able to have this conversation with them and all of you as well. So we will start with Meredith Reese. Ms. Reese is the Chief Integrated Behavioral Health Officer and has been with Vista Maria since July of 2003. In her current role, she is responsible for the integration of mental health and physical health services on campus, serving all youth in care. Meredith holds a certification in integrated behavioral health and primary care pediatric track, and has 20 years of extensive knowledge in the areas of mental health, trauma, and adolescent development. Meredith holds a master's degree in mental health counseling with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy from Western Kentucky University, and is a licensed professional counselor. In addition, she is a featured speaker, presenter, and trainer related to human trafficking and trauma. And yes, trauma is a huge part of human trafficking. Meredith is an active member and board member of the Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force and is chair of the Southeastern Division. Meredith raises awareness to stand against human trafficking through community advocacy and presentations. In 2014, Meredith was a recipient of the Department of Health and Human Services Best Practice Award for her work and dedication to the anti-trafficking movement. Thank you so much, Ms. Reese. Next, Chief Elvin Barron, which I think many of you know from many positions he has held over the many years. Well, now the city of Southfield is very lucky because they appointed Elvin V. Barron as a chief of police on Monday, July 29th, 2019. Chief Barron previously served as a deputy chief for the City of Detroit Police Department, where he commanded 5 precincts and 8 specialized units: SWAT, Bomb Squad, K9, Air Support, Harbor Master, Traffic Enforcement, Tactical Response Unit, and the Citywide Parks Detail. Chief Barron holds an associate's degree with Wayne County Community College, a bachelor's degree from Central Michigan University, and a master's degree from Bowling Green State University. Chief Barron is also a veteran of the United States Navy, serving 8 years as an operations specialist. And I know him personally from working with him over the years when I was at Fox 2 and then Channel 7 and Crime Watch Daily. He knows his stuff. Thank you for being here, Chief Barron. Next, we go to Dr. Patricia Wilkerson Audibach. The good doctor. Wow, she's got so many awards and accolades under her belt. And personally, which I don't even think she knows, she's helped my family in a tremendous way. Well, Dr. Audibach is the corporate vice president and academic and community affairs at the Detroit Medical Center, where she oversees all aspects of graduate and undergraduate education. Her career in medicine began over 27 years ago, even though she looks so young, and has held various leadership roles at the DMC, including Chief of Emergency Medicine at Harper Hutzell Hospital and System Lead for Women's Health Initiatives at the DMC. The doctor received her medical degree from Wayne State University School of Medicine and completed a combined residency in emergency medicine and pediatrics at Detroit Receiving Hospital and Children's Hospital of Michigan at the Detroit Medical Center. She also completed an executive MBA from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She is a strong advocate for women's health and currently serves on the board of directors for the March of Dimes SEM. She has received numerous awards, as I said it before, and has been recognized as a woman of excellence by the Michigan Chronicle, a top woman in healthcare by Crane's Detroit Magazine, and acknowledged by Becker's Hospital Review as one of the nation's top 100 hospital and health system chief medical officers to know in 2016 and 2017. Thank you so much for all you do. All of our panelists are just incredible individuals, and we're also blessed to have them with us today. And last, but certainly not least, Christine Camacho. Christine is a human trafficking victim turned thriver. And we are all working to have more of them in our space, thrivers like Christine. As a young child, she and her siblings were trafficked by their drug-dependent mom. Today, she is one of the founding board members of the Tomorrow Association of the Midwest and continues to actively be involved in multiple nonprofit projects for military veterans, those unhomed, and victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. Christine is amazing. She is powerful. She is important and so relevant in all the ways. She's earned her MBA and PMP in 2019, helping her to become the first female and the first person of color to become a C-suite level executive where she works. Congratulations. Recently, Christine started her PhD program in criminal justice to help drive positive social change for Indigenous and minority groups. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here on this Saturday morning and taking the time to have an open, frank, honest discussion and dialogue about this global epidemic. I know we all need to learn so much from you all, and I appreciate each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart, from everything that you have done personally, professionally, to do something about change in our community in every way. And today we're talking about what you have all done and continue to do in the fight against human trafficking and labor trafficking as well. So, Christine, you know, I got an opportunity to talk to Christine, as we all did, all the panelists, about her and her story and how driven and just impactful and powerful and her spirit just radiates. And to say that we're proud to have you here, to say that we're proud to have you standing before us is an understatement. You are the definition of we can get through this, we can get out of this. And I'm just so honored and humbled that you are willing to come here and share your journey with all of us, because that's where it starts, sharing and communicating. Now, Christine, please share what you feel comfortable sharing about your journey and how you have been able to accomplish and become this incredible woman for the world to see.
I thought I was unmuted. My apologies. Thank you, Andrea, for that very emotional welcome. I started crying while you were speaking before I even started sharing. I'm honored to be on this panel and asked to be a part of this. I think it's very important for thrivers and survivors to share their stories. It's not always easy. I've talked to other people in similar situations, and it's if you can turn it around and make it a positive and help others, it becomes rewarding in that way. And so I'm honored to be here. So I'm going to share my story. Mine happened when I was a child in the early 80s, before they even had the Trafficking Victims Act in 2000. So it didn't necessarily have the label that it has now. My mom had broken up with my father and had gotten into a different relationship, and she was dependent on drugs. And my brothers and my sister and myself were all forced to do things. At some point, eventually later down the line, he established a relationship with her. You know, Andrea mentioned poverty and addiction. That was definitely where we were at. We were incredibly poor, and she was addicted. We lost our home. We ended up living in a school bus. They took out the seats, so we lived on the school bus floors in a parking lot in Reno. We had to use the bathrooms and milk cartons and coffee cans. We were often having to beg for food. And that's actually how we ended up being found later down the line, because we had begged for food at an officer's house. And he wasn't home, but his wife was, and she brought her food to us and then gave us a card. And at that time, she said, you know, tell your parents to call this number. And so we'd given I was 6 years old. Well, sorry, 5 years old when it happened, 7 years old when they found us. So I'd been having for a couple of years as a child, which were my siblings. So like we gave it to my parents and or my mom and her boyfriend at the time, and she abandoned us in the parking lot. And so we were shipped off to foster homes after that. But prior to that, the years that we had to go through, it was incredibly hard. Abuse was definitely a big part of it. We had our hands held over burning stoves, gas stoves, until our hands bubbled. He would heat up the knife and put it to my brother's private parts. We were forced to even watch him and my mom engage in sexual activity, and then forced ourselves to do the same. I was doing things at 5 years old and 6 years old some people don't do until they're older, if they do it at all. So as far as psychological issues, it's definitely played a role in a lot of broken relationships as an adult. And then I'm also very overprotective of my children. I have 2 daughters. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. I didn't think I was gonna be. I wrote down notes, so let me bring it back. So, in addition to living in a school bus, before that time we were squatting in empty houses. And when they did give us food, there was maggots in it. We were forced to sorry. Yeah, so I actually might not go into the detail, but it was all sexual. We were forced to do things we shouldn't have been forced to do. And my mom watched us. She was so dependent on drugs. She not only allowed it to happen, she stood there and watched it happen. Sorry, let me get back. At one point in time, we had actually got out of the bus and we're running around the streets of Reno because that's where we were found. And the cops actually found us and brought us back. And we thought, oh gosh, this is when we're gonna be saved. Don't they think it's weird, right? Because I had my older sister too. That it's weird that we live in a school bus, but they didn't come inside. They just said, hey, keep your kids off the street. You know, this is the 80s, right? People didn't know what sex trafficking was. And we were thinking that was when they were going to take us away, and they didn't. As far as drinking water, we had to go to gas stations and fill up jugs of water. And one time I urinated on myself on the way there and I couldn't hold it. And so he forced me, because we all use the bathroom in cartons, like I said, in coffee cans. He forced me to drink everyone's urine out of the milk carton. Sorry. I just remember the cold floors and being scared and the abuse. And just facial expressions and sounds and smells, and I get triggers now. All these years later, I get triggers. But I did want to share, you know, as I learned more myself, that everyone's experience is different. Oftentimes we think about sex trafficking as like she said, teenagers, and it is that way, you know, and they're I hurt so much for the teenagers and the girls that are being trafficked to multiple people, multiple times a day. And I can't even imagine what they must be going through. Anyway, so everybody's story is different. One of the stories, a couple of stories I'll share with you as I've been on this journey talking to others. One girl, her story, her father was a single father and would ask her to bring her friends home, like for sleepovers. And she didn't know right away. And he would have her bring the friends over and the girls would sleep over, but the friends wouldn't necessarily say anything. It wasn't until a few friends later. But every time he brought her, she brought a friend home, she would lose that friend. But he would treat her to things. So he would give her things that she wanted, or expensive toys, or whatever she asked for. And so she was okay with asking friends until one friend told her what was really happening. So like I said, it's different for everybody, and she didn't realize till she was older. And another person I met, her boyfriend trafficked her. He pimped her out to a strip club. And so it looks different in different places. And for some people, they might not even know that they're going through it. You know, sometimes they attach to their oppressor, their trafficker. And they somehow make it seem okay or right in their minds, when it's not. And even now, when I work with some of the groups here in Pittsburgh, there's a group here. They have a home where the women can come in at any time that they want and get clothes and food. And sometimes the traffickers drop them off there, but they just leave and they go back to their situations. And similar to the news story that Andrea had a couple years ago, you know, sometimes it takes them a little bit to come back around and say, hey, I need help. but it has, you know, oftentimes it has to be them realizing it and wanting it, because otherwise they'll end up back in the same situation that they were in before. So, I think, yeah, so I wanted to talk about poverty and addiction, and it is oftentimes people who, like I said, it was my mom. For the one lady, it was her dad. For the person, it was her boyfriend. It doesn't always look like, you know, someone will just snag you off the street and, you know, traffic you to other people. In some countries, yes, but not always. And United States is #1 for human trafficking. So we definitely have to take action. And so I'm honored to be on this panel. Thank you.
Christine, let me just say to you, gosh, there's so much. I wish we could be on here for hours. You are everything. You are strong. You are vulnerable. You are compassionate. You have this fight in you that is remarkable. You are so bright. Your light is so incredible. And I'm so humbled. And, you know, to hear you share your truth. And as you said, it is not easy to talk about and relive, because talking is reliving. It is not easy to relive the struggle, and the struggle still is there. But you have come out so incredibly strong and courageous and mighty and brave. And I'm just so honored to be in your presence. And I hope I can speak for other people on this Zoom as well, that they are as well. As you said, your tears were flowing, so were mine. And I hope that these tears lead all of us to doing something, so that what happened to you and what happened to other people stops, and that we start talking about it more, because it won't if we don't. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so open and honest and sharing things that hurt, sharing your pain. I'm just blown away at the person that you always were, and now the person you are becoming. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm hoping, I know I look probably just like a mess. I'm crying, and I'm just overwhelmed, as I'm sure you all are. But that's a good thing, because that kind of emotion makes us act. It's time for all of us to become even more engaged and take Christine's truth and her journey and try to motivate ourselves and get us the information and knowledge that we need to move forward. So I'm asking all of our panelists if they can all unmute, so we can really get into the discussions that we need to continue to have. Christine was the best sounding board, the best beginning of this that we could have ever imagined. And we are so blessed to have you, my dear. And I want all of our law enforcement, our educators, our medical professionals to join on this panel right now with me, as well as we just continue to talk and continue to be honest and open and candid about what we are dealing with right here in our backyard and around the world. And so I wanna ask you guys each, and I'm gonna start with Dr. Audebach, about your relationship when it comes to human trafficking, doctor, and how this has affected you, what your marching order is, what your charge is to this epidemic.
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning. And as you said, this is very powerful. Thank you to the list for raising awareness around and continuing charges for my organization. I have conversations like this, the better it will become, and the less hopefully we'll see this grow. For me, as an emergency room physician, and I still practice emergency medicine, even though I have a lot of administrative roles, my interest in this area started quite a ways back. And early on, it became very aware that in Wayne County alone, we had a really large challenge with how we collected our rape samples. That's gotten way better now. And early on, I partnered with the Wayne County Medical Society to set up a safe examination opportunity at our hospital at Detroit Receiving. So now I'm very proud that that was something years and years ago that's still in effect, meaning that a lot of the women that come to Detroit Receiving or Harper or anywhere on our downtown campuses can now have examinations by safe examiners, which means that the evidence collected during a rape or any type of sexual assault will be done correctly and will increase the opportunity to have a successful prosecution. So that was where it first started. And then my interest in women's health just grew from there. As an ER physician, I touch obviously with a lot of these types of patients, and oftentimes the emergency department is the only opportunity they're going to have to receive health care or their only exposure. Oftentimes they're too afraid or too ashamed to go to a regular physician. So usually when they come into the emergency department, what we'll see is them coming in with symptoms related to a sexually transmitted disease, or maybe they're concerned that they may be pregnant or have been pregnant, had an abortion, and are now coming in with a complication. Sometimes it's an injury that they can't just take care of with a Band-Aid or a bandage. It's something a little bit more serious. Sometimes it's a psych issue that has gotten to the point where it's out of control, or they've overdosed on a drug. And so that's usually the starting point. Typically what I've seen in my practice is they will always come in with somebody else. They never come in alone. I've seen it where my suspicions are this is a trafficker. Sometimes they'll come in with a friend who may even be a victim themselves, but is sort of there to sort of watch and make sure that the conversation is not going to lead to anything that's going to allow them to leave their current state. One of the things that I think is beneficial for an ER physician is we typically will try to insist we need to meet with the patient alone. And that's the opportunity that we have to sort of begin at least some type of conversation. Now, our goal is never to really rescue anyone at that point. Our goal really is to make sure, number one, that we take care of any immediate, urgent, or emergent injuries or issues. That's number one. And number two, to provide information and give them the option that if they really want help, then we're here for that. Of course, anyone under the age of 18, if we have any degree of suspicion that there's anything foul going on, we have to report it. We are considered mandatory reporters under the eyes of the law, and that is our responsibility. But if they're over 18, we're not there to rescue because as we just heard, they have to sometimes make that choice. Oftentimes they're afraid, they're ashamed when they come in. And even some of us in healthcare pass judgment, making it even harder for them to disclose what happened. I can tell you one story about a young man that came in one evening. He was underage and he had a retained foreign object in his rectum. He wasn't particularly dressed very well. And you can hear the snickers and the comments, and you could see on his face the sheer shame that he had. And then in communicating with him further, he shared, he had had an interaction with his boyfriend of 16. They know the words to say. These folks are savvy, so he knew not to say it with somebody older. But when you go a little bit deeper, and you have to be honest, that I always try to tell the patients, I want you to tell me what happened. If somebody is hurting you, or if you're in a dangerous situation, I can provide help and resources. I always try to make sure they know that I have to communicate this. I'm going to have to share this with somebody else because you don't want to violate their trust. And, just being very honest and very sincere. And with that, he did explain that there were some situations that he did not want that had happened to him. He had been in foster care. He was a runaway, and he was forced into a situation that was not healthy for him. He went to surgery because of the retained foreign object. It was a broken bottle glass. And I did have to communicate to the authorities what happened to him, and he was able to get removed from the situation and put into foster care. In his instance, there wasn't anybody with him because I think his trafficker realized it was such a serious issue, he wasn't going to be leaving the hospital. So in that situation, we were able to get him help. But again, our goal is not necessarily to rescue, but give information, give a card, give pamphlets or a number where they can call so that they can make the decision when they're in a better place to get help. So that's really what we try to do in the emergency room.
Doctor, you know, and I think that makes sense, because at this point you want them to know that there is someone you can go to when you're ready.
Yes.
And you take those steps, you know, the baby steps that need to be taken in the right way so you don't scare them away from that one moment when they say, I'm going to take that card and use it.
Yes.
Chief Barron, you know, when, you know, I know in law enforcement, you've seen, you know, we say we've seen it all, but then all of a sudden something else happens. But when it comes to human trafficking, labor trafficking, you know, in the city of Detroit, when you work there, in Southfield, throughout Metro Detroit, from your perspective, how does this touch your heart? And what do you guys do as far as work and action?
Yes, and I want to start off by acknowledging Christine as well, just for the courage she shared with all of us. Thank you so much for telling your story. And so being the head of an organization, Southfield, bordering a major city like Detroit, it is important for me to pay attention to what's going on in surrounding areas. When you look at Southfield, we have a large host of hotels, massage parlors. All these things are havens for criminal activity such as human trafficking. And so when you ask me about how it touched me, I'm very alarmed as I studied this subject. When I finished my master's degree in 2019, my paper was on human trafficking as I explored human trafficking as a modern day slavery. So that's how my eyes were open. And so immediately coming to the city of Southfield, that became on my list of top priorities for the city. And so what that means to this group is right away, I began to form what I call a hotel report. So any activities occurring at a hotel, I get a report, I see what's happening, what happened, and if there's something suspicious, I'm able to further that investigation, and at the appropriate time, I'll share with you some of those results. In addition to that, because I also mentioned the large variety of massage parlors where prostitution can be prevalent. We also pay attention to those doing random inspections. And in the course of that, we've made arrests for prostitution, which could lead to human trafficking. So this is a very passionate subject for me. The children that you've mentioned that are affected by this tragedy is a national concern. And so again, I'm very honored to be part of this panel, and I have more information at the appropriate time to share with you.
Thank you so much, Chief. And I know how committed you are to public safety and public service, and I thank you for that. Ms. Reese, I know that this is a lot to take in. And tell me what your thoughts are. And when you think about your relationship to human trafficking, what do you think people need to know from you?
Yes, well, and thank you, Christine, for sharing this, your story. You don't know how much this ignites the fire for us to continue on within this fight, you know, within the anti-trafficking movement. I think it's so important that we understand how impactful us talking about this, but also to moving towards action in protection of our youth, our adolescents, and our young adults who could fall, you know, as far as vulnerabilities to trafficking. It's near and dear to my heart because most who have fallen into this area have had so many significant adverse childhood experiences that has impacted from substance abuse, mental health, and trauma. And it's not only just the rescue piece, it's what happens after the rescue. It is the part of from the treatment and the care and concern ongoing through, it is a lifelong recovery and journey. But as we see with Christine and her story, it's still very impactful, still going through the journey, but it's also the thriving points, right? That we have to remember. And I really want to just emphasize that the importance of those thriving points, that it doesn't just end as being a victim. Please know that for Vista Maria, we have been very dedicated to this cause and have actually comprehensive programming for adolescent youth who are in the foster care system and have been since 2014. So my dedication and so forth to this cause will not go away. I'm going to be in this fight. So thank you so much for having me this afternoon.
I'm going to stay with you, Ms. Reese, because I wanted you to talk about briefly, obviously briefly, but concisely, because we got so much to get to in such a short time.
We do.
But recruitment. I know we talked a little bit about that, but talk about that. So even more layman, if we can even get more layman, about how this is happening and how are victims recruited.
Yes. So just real quick, we think about recruitment through persuasion, so to speak, when you're looking at what are the basic needs? If someone is homeless and runaway and so forth, what are they looking for? They're looking for shelter, they're looking for food. So looking for those basic needs, then building upon some other recruitment pieces of safety and security. If that person feels some sort of safety, false sense of safety and so forth, although they may not be, but in their mind, I feel that this trafficker is protecting me. And then through love and belonging. You know, a lot of those trafficking situations is created through a sense of loyalty, creating that sense of that. And then again, those purchasing of expensive gifts and sort of thing, those enticement efforts that may lure someone into this particular life. Again, those who are in those vulnerable circumstances are looking for a better way of life, right? And traffickers take advantage of those areas. Then you might see some recruitment, and again, you know, through force, and that's what some might think of the abductions and kidnapping and so forth. But we know that's not all the common measures of that.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Chief, I'm going to go back to you quickly too. You talked a little bit about hotels and certain areas that are havens for this kind of criminal activity. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, briefly as well, some of the other things that maybe we don't know of that you guys do know of, that obviously not compromising how you investigate, but where this is happening and some of those areas throughout Metro Detroit that we need to be careful about and be warned about or just aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna start off by with an alarming fact that as recent as 2015, Michigan ranked #2 in human trafficking, only behind Nevada. As times have went on with our awareness, the number has come down, but however, we're still in the top 10 as reported earlier. So let's talk about the state of Michigan first. In the state of Michigan, the highest volumes of trafficking have been Detroit, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, Lansing, and Mackinac Island. When we look at our area, Metro Detroit or Southeast Michigan, we have Detroit, Madison Heights, Warren, Southfield, Southgate, Redford, Allen Park, and Romulus all have had reported cases of human trafficking incidents. And I want to close with a national picture because many of us travel, many of us have families and friends that live different places. And so nationally, the top cities are Houston, Washington, D.C., New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Orlando, and Miami. So these are all things we have to understand when we engage in the idea of awareness and communication and paying attention to our surroundings, no matter where we are, whether we're in Michigan or abroad.
Thanks, Chief. And you also talked about, we talked about the big events, like, and someone mentioned like dream cruise or places where people gather in big numbers where you can kind of get lost in the sauce, so to speak, and people may be able to spend more time with you and grooming and enticing in those kind of ways. And I'm sure that, you see those things as well, correct?
Right. Yes. And so, and that leads us to the coordination that we have with the Southeast Michigan Trafficking and Exploitation Task Force. It's called SIMTEC to make it simpler for the audience. And so it's an FBI coordinated task force. We have members assigned from all Southeast Michigan police departments. It's up to at least 40 different members assigned. And you mentioned it, Andrea, anytime there's a major event such as an international auto show, in the past we had the Super Bowl, All-Star games. This task force coordinates, and there's been times where Southfield has been the headquarters for this coordination so that we're paying attention to human trafficking activity in an attempt to disrupt it.
Absolutely. And those are things that are scary because those are events that we all enjoy, but but sometimes there's people in there with menacing and cruel intentions, and we just have to be aware of those things. Thank you so much, Chief. I want to talk about the risk factors. We talked about a little bit about that. I did, Christine did, about how this can happen and how it can develop and why. We talked a little bit about that, but you know, Meredith, do you want to talk about a little bit more about those things briefly, if you could, please?
Yes, well, most definitely. It's really important to really focus on the vulnerability factors. When we talk about the economically disadvantaged, those who are undocumented immigrants. We talk about labor trafficking and other various forms of trafficking. Substance abuse addiction, definitely impacting the family. Homelessness and runaways, right? You know, it's very important to understand those who are running away, who they're running to, right? And most importantly, who's looking for them. And sometimes we forget about those points of who's looking for the children. Strain family support system, especially of those youth or young adults who may identify themselves as LGBTQ plus, and children who are in the juvenile justice system, foster care system. Those are in your opening remarks, Andrea, and then domestic violence and so forth. If we look at vulnerability, some people think of who is it? We got to change from the who to the circumstances, right? And what people fall into those categories. And when we start to addressing even those categories, right? That's part in the fight of addressing human trafficking also.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Christine, I want to go to you because I want to talk about, when you talked about your story, you talked about, there's the threats and the intimidation and the violence that can be associated with this. Can you talk about, obviously you were so eloquent in explaining the horror that happened in your life and your family and your siblings and your mom as well, who was a victim as well. Can you talk about what that looks like, the threatening aspect, the violence that's associated with all of this?
I can definitely share from, as a young child, a lot scary, especially when you're looking to someone who's supposed to take care of you, who's responsible for you. Like I said, they would burn our hands over the gas stove, our hands would bubble. They would burn the knife and put it to our skin. We've had guns to our head. We were taken out and, with ropes tied around our wrists and then later we had to carry shovels and he told us to dig our graves. If we didn't do these things, this is what would happen to us. And we were literally little kids digging our graves in the dirt. And I have a scar still on my face. My brother has one still. And we don't talk about it often, but when we do, I think we've come far enough in our lives that we know that we've accomplished a lot and we've protected our own children. But I think that, people have to think about there's a lot of, anything can be a weapon when you think about it, but there's definitely guns, drugs, knives, ropes, and like I said, shovels. My brother scars from being hit with the shovel. And so violence is definitely, sorry. Yes.
No apologies, sweetheart, none. We are just so honored that you're even able to sit here and share with us. Your bravery, there's no words to describe how powerful and impactful it is. Doctor, I want to talk about the injuries. You talked a little bit about one young man in an instance. What are some of the injuries, if you can kind of tell us about, what you see physically, mentally, when you're dealing with a victim, survivor of human trafficking, labor trafficking? Tell me what you see as far as mentally, physically, and when you encounter these victims and survivors.
So, first mentally, a lot of times they will not make direct eye contact because there's still a sense of fear. Like I said, a lot of times they'll come in with somebody else who's watching to see the interaction. Typically the trafficker wants them to be okay, but they want to get in and out as quickly as possible. And so you just have to really be aware and really understand some of the cues. As Christine noted and Chief Barron noted, they'll come in with multiple, if you really do your good history, you'll hear, a 15-year-old who's had multiple sexually transmitted diseases, or maybe even multiple pregnancies. That's like, wait a minute, what's happening here? You can tell the interaction between somebody who comes in and may say, I'm their parent, And you're looking and you're like, well, you don't look alike. And then you look at the person, the patient, and they're not looking at them. You can tell there's a definite disconnect. That's the first red flag. We have as emergency room physicians, because again, we're probably the number one touch point, at least in an organized setting, that they're going to come in contact with. And we have to have a high index of suspicion. Once that happens, you still have a heavy lift in terms of gaining their trust and support, as I talked about. And I think, our focus is on just the injury. So lacerations, broken bones because of, beatings, a lot of sexually transmitted diseases, oftentimes a lot of, I think I may be pregnant. So they're coming in just to get confirmation. And then there have been sometimes complications related to abortions, where they're coming in to get taken care of. Those are some of the highlights in terms of illnesses. And then the psych disorders. I mean, people who are trafficked still have issues with bipolar depression. Sometimes they may come in after an overdose, either intentional or via a drug that they've been abusing. So those are other elements. Typically with those instances, they typically will get admitted. And so it's up to the admitting team to really take control of that. But again, our goal is really to just empower them as much as possible. As Christine noted, when they got that card, that was their ticket. And for us, they may not be at a place when they come to see us that they're ready to say, hey, I'm ready to leave, help me, because they still have a lot of fear. They don't really know, what am I going to do after this? Are they really going to be able to help me? And so just providing them with that information can sometimes be the step that's going to lead them to their freedom.
One last thing for you quickly, and I want to move on to our other distinguished panelists as well. What about, I know we don't like to talk about it, it's reality. What about life expectancy? When we talk about people that are in the trenches of this, and when we talk about what this means for their life, and sadly, lack of, how real is that? And what do you see as far as life expectancy?
So, depending on what you look at, if you just look at what is the average life expectancy for somebody who's just homeless, let's just look at that. We won't even talk about the trafficking piece. Their life expectancy is on average, living on the streets, 5 years or less. 5 years or less. And that's just that aspect of it. So when you add that trafficking component onto it, it still hovers 5 years or less from the point that they're out there. That's what we see. And it just depends. I mean, it just depends on when they go into that situation, in terms of how long they exist in it, in terms of how long they'll, you can realistically expect them to survive.
Thank you. I want to get to some. Oh, of course, absolutely. I want to get to some questions from our audience too, but I want to ask one question too of Christine and whoever else might want to chime in on this quickly as well, before we move on to questions from our guests. Psychologically, I don't even know. I mean, I'm not a professional. You all are. That's why you're here. How on earth is Christine still standing here? How on earth is she still as exquisite and powerful and achieving? How do you get to that point where we get survivors and thrivers and Christines? Psychologically, how do we get there? How do we help get them there?
Oh man, that's a good question, because I know that not everybody as fortunate as I am to get to where I am today. And for that, I'm absolutely 100% grateful. I think that because my dad was able to get us later on in life out of foster care when I was around 8 years old, and we were still poor, but he raised these, like when I was being trapped, when I was with that situation, we didn't go to school. So there weren't teachers or counselors to help us. And we got further behind in our education. So where other people were at, we weren't learning. So my dad had to get us up to speed. And he did such a great job that, I credit my dad, but other people in my life along the way. But because my dad, he got a chalkboard from Salvation Army, said, you guys have to learn all this. We sat in a parking lot, and he got us up to speed. I skipped the 5th grade. I started college when I was in high school. But it was having a support system of friends too, as well. So I think it's knowing who to go to. Lots of things happened to me in the process afterwards that are still incredibly traumatic. Psychologically, you just have to connect to other people who will help you. If you don't have that support system, you don't know that it exists, you don't know that there's a better way, then you're not going to work towards that better way. So there has to be exposure to that at some level, either through programs like Meredith works at, or having people in your life, like I'm sure Chief, there's programs that you have as well at the police departments there to help people in the recovery process. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. You did fabulous, as everyone else continues to do. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to get to, and I do want to get to, before we wrap up, some resources. I'm going to have everybody kind of give a sum up and some resources and some points you really want to get across before we wrap it. I want to take some questions from our guests who are joining us as well. One of them is a tough one, How do you talk to your kids about this? I mean, primarily teenagers, but all kids. How do you have this conversation? Because it's scary. It's a scary conversation. It's important, but it's not an easy one to have. I mean, we do the birds and the bees, but this is a whole other thing to tackle as a parent or a caregiver in some way. How do you do that? And tell me, whoever best, if you guys want to raise your, who wants to tackle that one first? Because that's a question from the audience. Christine, you go first, and whoever else wants to tackle that as well.
Yeah, if you don't mind me go. So obviously, because of my experience, I'm incredibly overprotective of my kids, and I talk to them about it all the time. But what I talk to about my friends and their kids, and tell my kids to tell their friends, technology is the reason why trafficking is as bad as it is today. The social media, the internet, and the groups that they attach to. And some parents are scared, to poach upon their kids' privacy, but that's your child. So you're either going to get your kid mad, or your kid is something's going to happen to your child. So I think parents need to weigh that. It is a hard conversation, but for my kids, for me, it was easier because I spoke from experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whoever wants to take that next, I think that's important, because that's something, obviously, one of our guests really needs some answers and some clarification on how to have that conversation.
And I'll add to that subject.
Okay. Chief, go ahead.
As parents, as professionals, we have to welcome and embrace those tough conversations. And that's how we make progress. And so if you're a parent and you're struggling with how to go about having that conversation, don't be afraid to ask for help from persons such as the doctor who sits with us, from the police department. There's agencies like Haven, the domestic violence groups. All of these contribute to helping you with that conversation, to make sure you have the resources that you need, and then have the conversation geared for changing behaviors and awareness.
Andrea, I'd like to add too, I'm a mother of 3 daughters. And of course, being in the emergency department, they would always criticize, oh my God, you're just so extra. You see too many things and you bring that back home and then we have to suffer. Yeah, they did. But just like Christine, I am extremely protective because I see a lot. And I think what Chief said, you reach out for help if you're just uncomfortable, and it's okay, but you cannot avoid the conversation. And the sleepovers, I just want to talk about that for just 1 minute. I never let them sleep over, ever. And I haven't had any bad experiences, but I was just always very, very nervous, because it only takes a moment for something to happen that you can't reverse. And then the damage is done. And so I was always very, very protective in that way. And I think the other piece that the Chief just talked on is the social media. That right there, you got to get in their weeds. I'm not savvy with social media, but I had to get savvy with social media. And they can look at you, they can roll their eyes. You're not there to be their friends. That's okay. You have to know who their friends are. I know of one story where a friend introduced somebody to this life. They were going to a party. She was her cool friend. Yeah. And she thought she was, going to a party with some other friends, and then things went bad very quickly. So you have to raise your antennas. You have to use your parenting sense and ask those tough questions. They ain't got to like you. That's okay. That's my honest, humble advice. That's not even a professional advice. That's a mother to mother advice.
Well, we like all that advice too. We like humble, yes. We like real, we like all of that. So keep it coming. Meredith, I want you to comment on that. And I also want to ask you one more question before we kind of do a little wrap up. Okay. So you can talk about that, and I have a question following up for you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to make the point about discussing how to develop and maintain healthy relationships, not only within the family, within friends also. And when things go sour, how from that rupture, break of the relationship of how to repair. And a lot of our kids do not do that. They want to have the argument again on social media also, right? And so folks see those vulnerabilities also too that may come out. And then some folks, adolescents too, could get a sense of depression, lost sense of self, and they don't feel comfortable talking about these things within the family. So what they do, they reach out to others, strangers, and that's how social media gets introduced also. Because there's so many apps out there, social media apps, where it's anonymous. So you don't know who you're talking to. And again, this day and age, they are expressive, online and so forth. So I agree with everyone as being a parent and even a parent of a young boy, right? Of teaching him all those important things, not just our girls, our young men too, as they grow up. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to stick with you for one more thing. I want to talk about, and I want to stay on time, but I don't want to stay on time. I'm because there's so much to this. Okay. So tell me, Ms. Reese, the signs. I mean, I want tangible, even if the hearing is going to make us all, flutter. What are the signs that I know some things we won't see, but are there signs, are there things that we can see like something is wrong and this may be the path that I need to know about?
Yeah, well, just to be clear that when the disconnection, especially of family and friends, if they were once connected and so forth, and they starting to pull away, I think that is a red flag, along with for kids, sticking with the kids, not attending school, right, for periods of time. And believe me, it's not just one. I want to make sure that I'm very clear. Just because there's one, I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that a person's being trafficked, okay? There are multiple things that you need to put all together so that it can make sense. But again, and children who have been trafficked has still even been going to school at important time. So please know that, so just because I say that. And of course, engaging in any type of commercial sex acts, we need to, that's a red flag, of course. Being disoriented and not knowing their whereabouts because kids have moved from time to, from place to place, or individual or adult, not knowing their whereabouts. Of course, if they're unable to leave their place of residence or area, I think that is something that is critical. Having items that are quite expensive that maybe the adolescent is not able to really, to buy on their own or purchase, or the family that has been given to them. And of course, signs of mental, psychological, even physical abuse, signs that you may pick up on that child or adolescent and so forth who's really struggling with. These things can come over time. But again, as you build in relationships and asking those tough questions, you start to build those understanding what those signs are. And I think it's also too is pulling any type of resources to assure that, is this really true, and asking questions.
You're right, asking questions. Someone also said something about poor appetite, change in grades, isolation. And again, those things don't have to be that they're being trafficked or they're involved in that hemisphere, but they could be. So those are things to work with. Someone also said easily angered. So those are things that as a parent we should look at for all things, but it could be, don't take that off the list. Are they involved with someone or something that's harmful, or are they just being a teenager or a young person? We've really got to look at all the ingredients of that to figure out, with help from all people like you guys, with the expertise to help figure this out, and people that get it and that are open to having the conversations, that are scary conversations but necessary. I'm going to ask. I'm going to kind of go along. Okay, go ahead real quick, Ms. Reese, if you have something.
No, just one last point. And if the change in the friendship circle has changed also. Certain folks who are no longer friends anymore, now they got a whole new set of friends and so forth, really taking a deep dive into that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go around and I want everybody to kind of give we're going to do a minute, but everybody gets about 30 seconds. So as someone speaks, kind of think about what you're going to say as kind of your wrap up. And Doctor, I'm going to start with you, just what you want people to know as your parting words to them right now. What would you want them to know from you and your expertise and your connection and relationship with human trafficking and labor trafficking as well?
I think for me, just that this can touch anybody at any level of our society, that it is prevalent, it is happening, and that you just have to have a heightened awareness. You don't have to necessarily be that person's savior at that moment in time if you have suspicion, but just I think empowering yourself with the information you're going to get from this session today to share with somebody else. If you have any idea or suspicion, you don't have to judge them. You don't have to necessarily say, hey, are you doing this? Are you? But it just say, you know what? I just thought about you today. If this is something you can use, here you go. Just to be able to provide that information. You just never know where it may end up and where it may end up life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doctor. Chief Barron.
Yes, and I'm gonna close with an example of a local situation right here in Southfield, because I want you to understand that this is real. And so not even 4 months ago, we had 2 females who were brutally assaulted at a local hotel. We immediately knew something was wrong. We contacted that task force that I referred to earlier, the FBI Simtech task force, to do the investigation. As a result, 4 individuals were arrested and federally indicted for these. And here's the closer to it. None of them were residents of the state of Michigan. These individuals, they travel, they're out here. So please pay attention, be mindful, pay attention to your children and your surroundings.
Thank you, Chiefs. Thank you for sharing that, because it does bring it home, you know, that it's right here. 4 months ago was yesterday, essentially. Ms. Reese, your closing words?
Yes, I just want to say this is such an important fight. We should never give up, because guess what? Traffickers are not giving up. So we should be even more into this fight every day, all day. Talk to your children, being open and honest, be impactful, because everyone's mental health and trauma is the most paramount right now. And throughout COVID and so forth, here's another vulnerability that all of us experience. And we need to pay attention to that and respect one another, because we're all in this together. And I thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. And Christine, I will leave the last and final word to you, my dear.
I want to thank everyone here and for being invited to speak on this panel. I think the biggest thing for me, especially in this past year, where misinformation, right? You guys got a lot of education here today, and battling misinformation. People are putting information out there that's actually hurting trafficking victims and not helping them, because now people are only looking at only if you're a celebrity, only if you're a politician, and you're involved in Pizzagate or something, that you're responsible. They need to know it's happening in their own neighborhoods, that their own children are at risk. And I think that's one thing when you're engaging in conversation with people that it's important to bring light to. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. This has been so impactful and powerful. I'm just more energized and charged to do more work and involve myself with you and your crusades and your missions, and just sharing everything that we've learned today. Thank you for being so honest and open and candid, because that's where it starts. We have to talk about this. It's tough, it's scary, it's horrific, but we've got a band of people here. We got a kinship here, and we're all in this fight together. And the guests that we can't see right now, I know that you are empowered to join that mission as well. So I thank you all for being here. I'm honored to be a part of this as well. Thank you so very much. And be safe, stay healthy, and just, you know, love yourself. You matter, and the people around you matter. And just don't forget that. Don't forget that. Please, just don't forget that. At this point, I'll turn it over to Chevelle Roman.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I wish we had more time. I thank you so much for pouring your passion into facilitating this very, very important discussion. The way you probe into the questions, you brought out things that were very informative, and we thank you. We thank each of the esteemed panelists on this discussion today. I think we really had a panoramic view from all different viewpoints about what human trafficking is. So I thank each of you, doctors and chief, all of you for being here today. And to Christine, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for having the courage to rewrite your narrative and to tell your own story. You have been so impactful to each of us today. This cannot be a difficult, an easy thing for you to do. And so we thank you. We thank you so much. So at this time, we're going to conduct just a final poll so that we can get some information about, oh, before we do that, I wanted to let you guys know that every year when we have an event like this, we identify a nonprofit organization that we actually gift to. And so we are supporting a donation drive that will benefit Vista Maria this year. The information is on your screen. We're running out of time, but I would encourage each of you to take a screenshot of this, and as you can, to give generously to support the great work that Vista Maria is doing to support people who are involved in human trafficking. So we thank you for your work. We have a lot of resources that you can refer to should you need to. They are on your screen as well, especially the human trafficking hotline and all of the other numbers that are relevant to this situation. Now, we will close with a poll just so that we can get an assessment of what we did right today, how we can continue to bring more programming of this magnitude to our community. And I would just like to say in closing, we, the Great Lakes chapter, have a mentor group, and they're called the Great Girls. They are all involved in programming that we present to them as well. And they are involved in this outreach to help Vista Maria. That's one of the things that I love about what we do. We allow girls to be exposed to giving back to their communities. And so there's a piece of artwork on the screen right now, an amazing, amazing young girl in our mentoring program, Jasmine B. She created this piece of work. And I just want to give shout outs to Jasmine and all of the girls in our Great Girls program. And then one last thing, you know, in order to bring programming of this magnitude, there are a lot of wizards behind the curtain. We don't do this just by ourselves. And so I would just personally like to give a shout out to our biggest wizard, and that is Cheryl Smith. She is our program chair for the Great Lakes chapter of the Links, and she was just instrumental in putting this program together and gathering all of this information and bringing all of these panelists together today. So I hope you have enjoyed our presentation. Thank you. Oh, please just look on our website. We have a lot of additional programs coming up. We have a Heart Talk coming up. We have a STEAM event introducing young people to math in a fun way. It's called Math Mayhem. So if you would just please refer to our website for more information about more programming presented by the Great Lakes chapter. Thank you for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Are there some people who are still taking our poll? Okay, we've closed the poll. Thank you all.